It's time to tackle the third right line for set 5, the triumphant return of the brave heroes. But on top of that, we also have the very first encounter cards of set 5 revealed, which is none other than the evolution of Peanut Butter Dragon. Let's talk about it!
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey card fighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we once again go over the reveals of the Tuesday livestream reveals. And you might notice that there is something absent from what I explained in the intro, and that are all the cards that are attaining about this new collab set with, I believe, Ragnarok or Hero Rulers of Ragnarok or something like that. And the reason why I'm not including them in this video is that usually the collab cards, there isn't really a lot of buzz around it. Yes, we're gonna get this set in the English format as well on the same day as the Japanese is going to get them released, which means they will, or they can potentially be relevant. But so far, I'm a bit skeptical about it, and I don't know what the general consensus about it is, that if people are interested in those cards or not. If you're interested in about me talking about these collab cards, then let me know in the comments down below, because there were a bunch of new cards revealed, like I think 3 to 4 right lines, quantity of cards revealed with a lot of interesting mechanics. So if you guys are interested in me explaining and talking about analyzing these cards, let me know in the comments down below, and I might do a separate video later this week about these cards. But that said, we're not here about the collab set, we're here for set 5, the new right line for Dark States with the mix of Brandgate, and of course the 2 new Shadow Paladin Cater Sanctuary support cards for the encounter strategy. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into this right line and see what the brand new Dark States right line can do. So first off, we have the starter, which is one with Profound Mercy Chaos, and of course it's just a generic starter, so there isn't really anything to talk about. So let's move on to the grade 1 version of Chaos. So here we have In the Calm Streets Chaos, and its effect is auto when a unit rode upon by Quagmire of Solace Chaos, reveal 2 cards from the top of your deck and put all normal units from among them into your soul, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. And it has of course the glitter keyword. So interesting enough, this is essentially Soul Charge 2, but it's selective soul charge, so you're not going to soul charge any triggers, which is nice, which basically means you're going to keep the triggers in your deck. Now the downside is you're going to put them to the bottom of your deck, which means if you don't have any skills that shuffles, you're not really going to see your trigger. So what did you actually accomplish? Basically nothing, and you just put a trigger on the bottom of the deck and you did not get another soul, which in that case you might as well just put it into your soul. But if we have cards that allow us to shuffle the deck, then it's a complete different story. Overall, a potential Soul Charge 1 or Soul Charge 2 for free is nice, which allow you to set up your plays. Then if we move up to the grade 2, we have Quagmire of Solace Chaos, and this Chaos has the effect, although when the unit is rode upon by Approaching Fangs Chaos, Soul Charge 1, if the Soul Charge card was a trigger unit, draw a card, and if it was a normal unit, choose up to 1 card from your soul and call to the rearguard circle. And it has the glitter keyword. So this effect is actually kind of nice, because it's essentially always going to be a +1. Either you're going to draw a card, or you're going to call a card to the rearguard circle. And you will have plenty of targets, because you can either call this grade 2, because you're going to write the grade 3 when this skill activates. You can also call the grade 1, or you can call the card you just soul charge, or any of the other cards you soul charge with the grade 1, or any other support card that allows you to soul charge. So you can definitely get some nice beaters onto the board that allow you to be a bit more aggressive right on at the get-go when you write your grade 3 turn. But it can also be more than a plus, because if you soul charge a trigger unit, you draw a card, which means it's a +1, but also a +1 on your soul count, which is going to matter because we're talking about the Dark States right line, which means we're going to interact with the soul. But to really understand what we're setting up here, let's take a look at the new grade 3 of this right line, which is of course Approaching Fangs Chaos. And this Chaos has the effects: act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost counter +1, and discard a card from your hand. Look the 3 cards on the top of your deck, choose 1 card from among them, put it into your hand, choose up to 1 unit card from among them, call to the rearguard circle, and put the rest into your soul. So this is essentially a toolbox skill, because we get a card in our hand, we get a card on the field, and we get a card into our soul from the top 3. So depending on what we see in the top 3, we can get either more defensive in our hand, get an aggressive beater on the board, or get a specific card in the soul that we're going to require for specific skills. I do have to stress here that this skill, even though it sounds a lot, it is still essentially just a counter +1 for a +1. Because we're going to discard a card, but we're going to get a new card in our hand, which basically means it's a cycle. But then we have the counterblast cost for getting a unit on the board and then getting a soul. So counterblast 1 to get +1 soul and a unit on the board isn't terrible, but because it's behind RNG, because it all depends on what the top 3 card of our deck is, this could somewhat limit the value that could generate from the skill. Now that said, the skill is still essential because you can also do it a little bit differently, because you can choose up to 1 unit card from among them to call to the rearguard circle. So you can also just choose nothing and put 2 cards into the soul, because you will always force to put 1 card in your hand. And you might think to yourself, counterblast 1 to soul charge 2 sounds pretty bad, because we had rearguard skills that were basically essentially dead, and they were just played out of necessity and not because they were good skills. The thing is, this might actually be worth it, because it will set up for your second skill depending on what you're gonna soul charge, what you see in the top 3 cards of your deck. Because his second effect is Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, if your soul has 8 or more cards with different card names, choose one of your rear guards and it gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. If your soul has 13 or more cards with different card names, choose all of your rear guards instead of 1. So this is what we're essentially working towards. Unlike Baron Magnus, where you just want to have a fat stack beneath your Vanguard, now you want to have a selective fat stack beneath your Vanguard. And the power output is honestly pretty decent, because getting 10k power to a rearguard means that rearguard's gonna hit for a decent number. But if you can immediately power up the entire board, that means you're gonna get plus 50k power. And important here is that it's free. It doesn't cost counterblast, it doesn't cost soul blast. You just swing with your Vanguard, your board gets a plus 15k power buff, and then you're gonna swing with decent attacks right at the get-go. Now, the setup is a bit tricky, because having 8 cards with different card names can already be quite rough, but with his first effect, you can selectively get cards in the soul, which you're going to need to meet this condition. And this is the reason why I say that maybe sometimes just not putting a rearguard onto the board might be more beneficial, because if you see 2 cards on top of your deck which aren't in your soul already, you might as well want to put them into your soul if you already have the board you're going to need to pressure your opponent. So it all depends on the scenario and how you want to basically play out your game plan, which will dictate which choice you're going to make. Now, of course, this isn't everything, because if this was everything, this deck feels basically a lackluster Baron Magnus, or a Baron Magnus which require you to jump through more hoops with less payout, because Baron Magnus just needs a fat stack and can get 5 attacks in a turn while also controlling your opponent's board. But we have a different card which changes things a little bit. This will change the equation here, because we have Cool Heated Executioner Mikani, and Mikani has the effect auto. When this unit is placed in a rearguard circle, cause counterblast 1 and soul blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards with the same grade as the card soul blasted for this cost and retire it. So keep in mind, this is also a Brandgate card, so this gives Brandgate and Dark States basically control options, and depending on what type of deck you want to play in Brandgate, you can get away with playing this because it gets you more control, but the counterblast is kind of restrictive, if I'm gonna be very honest, because depending on which right line you're gonna play, counterblast is hard to come by. And in this case, for the Chaos right line, I think it's alright. It all depends on where you are in the scenario. Like, if you need counterblast for your soul charge capabilities, then maybe you don't want to use a skill. And soul blasting can be a bit tricky, especially if you need to soul blast a specific grade. But if you soul charge like multiple copies of the same card, you might as well just soul blast this for a different cause, and it could be this particular unit. So, interesting skill, don't know if it's gonna be applied, but the thing about this card is its second effect, which is Glitter with Chaos, auto on rearguard circle, once a turn. When your Vanguard attacks, if your soul has 8 or more cards with different card names, stand this unit. If you stand this unit, put this unit into your soul at the end of your turn. This gives the deck access to multi-attack, and it could be 4 attacks, it could be 5 attacks. And this is somewhat similar to the attack pattern that we see with Nirvana, with Aspera Ardea, where the first attack is going to be 13, and the second attack is going to be a bit stronger. And because your Vanguard is going to give this unit potentially plus 10k power, because the requirement of this unit to stand is the same for the Vanguard to give a rearguard plus 10k power. So you swing with 13, then it restands, and then it swings for 23. Now, if you have 13 units in your soul with different names, then you can use the booster behind behind it, which can potentially be an 18k booster, making the column quite sizable for the second attack. And if you could Persona ride that turn, then suddenly this is a 23k attack that turns into a 33k attack with a potential 18k booster, or maybe even more, because don't forget, we have the 18k base attack booster that we already have from the Baron Magnus ride line that could synergize with this deck, so you could have potentially a 28k unit behind it. So you suddenly have a massive column on the sidelines. So it basically comes down to what type of build we're going to play and how we want to interact with it. Because the interesting thing about this is that also this restand doesn't cost any resources. The only downside here is that the unit goes towards the soul at the end of turn. But because we are in a Dark States ride line or in Dark States deck, this might actually be beneficial, as because it goes towards the soul, it's safe from your opponent's harm. And we have card effects that allow us to grab cards from her soul and put it into her hand, or maybe directly to the field. At least what we have is that we have cards that allow us to use cards from her soul. So we can get this unit back onto the board for next turn to keep pressuring with multi-attacks, which honestly is a very nice synergy that we have here. And because unlike Greedon and Baron Magnus, things don't go towards the soul, that means our board is going to stay. So certain units are actually better in this deck than in those decks. For example, the Grade 1 from the Baron Magnus ride line. Yes, it's ideal for Baron Magnus because it's a 28k unit that comes out and swings, but now we can keep it on the board for the back row and have massive columns in general, which isn't really plausible for Baron Magnus, as since we keep shoving everything into the soul and we only call out 2 units instead of an entire board. And the same goes for Greedon, where we need to run specific units to keep resending our Vanguard over and over again. But this also means that other cards are off the table for this ride line because we don't actively soul charge, or we don't actively put everything in soul. So the Grade 1 from the Greedon archetype that allows to give Battledore a guard restrict doesn't work here. We also have the new Doreen the Thruster-like card, the triple rare from the previous set. That card doesn't work as wonders with this playstyle because we put cards from the top deck into the soul without actually soul charging. So it doesn't synergize with those skills all too well to get power to the unit. So we have to tinker a little bit with the cards in Dark States, but I'm confident there are definitely cards that work quite well with this playstyle because it's a bit different than what we used to, as now we basically attain a board throughout the game plan. Which is nice because it's a little bit different than we're used to with the previous ride lines for Dark States. Now, with this ride line for Dark States / Renegade discussed, let's take a look at the 2 new Shadow Paladin Keeter Sanctuary cards, because these cards are actually kind of spicy and they could definitely help, and they are definitely going to be a nice addition for the Peanut Butter Dragon archetype. As we first have this Grade 2 Skull Witch, the main. So yes, the main is once again a 5k base, but this time it's a Grade 2 instead of the Grade 1 counterpart that we had in the V series. But it isn't going to be a 5k for long, because our first effect is Continuous Rearguard Circle. During a turn, if you have a Vanguard with Blaster in its card name, this unit gets power plus 5k. So if you have Blaster Blade, Blaster Dark, Phantom Blaster Dragon, Phantom Blaster Overlord, or Majesty Lord Blaster, it's a 10k unit. So it's basically just a Grade 2 vanilla with this skill if you run into the Blaster archetype. Now, her other effect is Auto. When this unit is placed on the Rearguard Circle, if your Vanguard's clan is only Shadow Paladin, so if I read into this correctly, this basically means this skill will only work if you use the Shadow Paladin counter cards. It doesn't work with the Royal Paladin countercard cards, but it probably also doesn't work with the generic Cater Sanctuary cards. So you cannot use this in, like, let's say Hexorb Sorcerers or Bastion, for example. That's what I'm getting from this particular condition. But then, what does it do in the Shadow Paladin deck? Well, it is cost counter plus 1, put a card from your hand into your soul, and draw 2 cards. So it's a +1, but it's an incredibly good +1 because you draw 2 cards. And also, you put a card from your hand into your soul instead of just outright discarding it. And that part is very important, because a lot of the powerful cards or useful cards within Shadow Paladin uses soul. So this is great to fuel those cards while also drawing through your deck, which basically allows you to search through your key pieces you're going to need, like Phantom Blaster Overlord, maybe your Blaster Darks, or any other very powerful rearguard that you might play. So this is a very nice addition. I can definitely see this immediately being a 4-off in the deck, because, yeah, it's pretty good. But then we also have the new evolution for Phantom Blaster Dragon, which is a very spicy card, which is Phantom Blaster Overlord. And of course, it's a grade 3, it's not a grade 4, and it also has the Persona Right icon, which is also going to be important here, as it has the following effects. First off, it has continuous Vanguard Circle. If your soul has a Phantom Blaster Dragon, this unit gets critical +1. So it essentially is a double critical 13k attacker that comes after your first grade 3 turn. Now, very important note here is that unlike in a V Premium or in the OG era, this skill is a lot more consistent and easier to attain because of the right line, because of the right deck. As you always have Phantom Blaster Dragon on your grade 3 turn on your Vanguard Circle. So you only need to draw into this card and that's it. You don't need to draw into a grade 1, grade 2 and Phantom Blaster Dragon and then open this card to make this skill worth it. This basically is never going to be an issue, which is nice because it means from turn 4 onwards, you're going to swing with a double critical every single turn. And because Phantom Blaster Dragon already has the first skill that allows to give a critical, essentially, once you ride grade 3, every Vanguard attack swings with 2 critical, so that's nice pressure. But it also has the effect, auto Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks, retire 2 of your rear guards, choose a Blessed Dart from your soul or drop, call to the Vanguard Circle, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, that called unit and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. That restriction is almost never really an issue because you can only ride this on turn 4 and we are in standard, which means your opponent is always going to be on grade 3 thanks to the right deck being a thing once you ride this thing. Or there is one cheeky thing you can do. You can use this as your grade 3 your right deck instead of Phantom Blaster Dragon and then ride this on turn 3 and have the extra attack but don't get the extra power. But the thing is you don't get the critical and then you need to find another way to get the Phantom Blaster Dragon in your soul. You could use the main for it, but I don't know if that's the strategy you should go towards. You could, but I don't know if that's the ideal one. I'm very curious of what the direction is. The upside is that, unlike, the difference is, however, is that if you went for Phantom Blaster Dragon, that means this card comes out on turn 4, and if you want to have the Persona Right power when you multi-attack, that will be a turn 5. If you have this as your grade 3 in your right deck, then the Persona Right with the multi-attack is your turn 4 play. The only thing you sacrifice is the critical. Is the critical worth it? That's the interesting thing here. But that whole thing aside, let's analyze the skill in itself, because the interesting thing is that this skill, as already teased here, is that it gives multi-attack to the deck. You get 4 attacks instead of your basic 3 with the standard Phantom Blaster Dragon build. Now that said, if you go towards this thing after your Phantom Blaster Dragon turn, let's go with the idea that you still run Phantom Blaster Dragon as your grade 3 in your right deck, that means you're sacrificing your Persona Right turn to go into this thing. So you're sacrificing a draw and 30k power to the board. The thing is, what you get back for that is a critical to your Vanguard, which is alright, but you also get an extra attack and you get 10k power to that extra attack and 10k power to your Vanguard. So essentially, you don't lose 30k power, you lose 10k power, because in the original version you will never have that 4th attack, so we can ignore the 10k that we don't have on one of those attacks. So you only lose 10k power in a draw, but as a trade-in, you will get an extra attack. And you will have a passive critical on your Vanguard, and it doesn't cost you any resources, because that's also very important. It doesn't cost you counterblast, it doesn't cost you soulless. And yes, you lose 2 rear guards, but you get a Blessed Dart back onto the board, so essentially you only lose 1 unit. I think that's worth it over the Persona Right turn, especially if you can Persona Right turn after that, which makes it very interesting. So I think this is definitely an upgrade to the Phantom Blaster Dragon that we had so far. Now the thing is that I'm curious about is that, are we going to play this as our grade 3 in our right line, or are we going to just use this as a main deck unit like we see with the grade 4s for the Overdressed deck? I think it's a very interesting thing to discuss, because there might definitely be a argument to make here to say, don't run the Phantom Blaster Dragon in your right line, immediately go to this thing, have the multi-attack, and then just Persona Right on top of it, and just ignore the critical. Or if you want to have the potential of the critical, you could run like 1 or 2 copies of the Phantom Blaster Dragon in your deck, and use the main to get that card into your soul. That could be an option. I think we have to experiment to see what the better version of the deck is, with 4 copies of Discard in your main deck and the Phantom Blaster Dragon in your right line, or maybe this thing in your right line, 3 copies in your main deck, and maybe a couple of copies of Phantom Blaster Dragon into your main deck to put in Soul, or maybe not even 1 copy of the card and just ignore it in general. I'm very curious what you guys think of what the optimal version of this deck is, and which direction we can go. I definitely want to play test this a little bit, because now that I think about it, that's actually a very interesting thought to have here, and maybe that is the right direction to go to potentially break this deck and put it into the meta, or at least in the forefront of the current standard meta. But with that said, that's everything what I want to discuss today. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What you guys think of this new Rattler for Darkstance and a new support for Shadow Paladin within Keter Sanctuary. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!